Ready? Here we go.
Different points of view and highs and lows. A new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind, drown out the noise, and see if this connected. And see if this connected.
The mission of this Connected podcast is to connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along the way. To not necessarily agree, but be listened to. These conversations, of course, share the different perspectives of me and my guest. You, of course, are always welcome to agree or even disagree. But as always, we hope that it is done in charity. I'm Catholic.Dad, the host, and welcome to this Connected. And I'm so excited today to have a person that I met like 2.5 years ago. I have Sister Josephine Garrett from where?
Tyler, Texas. I'm a Texan. I'm from Texas.
Actually, I told my wife, I was teasing my wife. I said, we're going to move to Texas. It's like, I've met some nice people over there. But
we got a lot of people moving to Texas right now.
Right?
Yeah.
By the time we retire and move to Texas, it's just going to be California. So we're just going to have to look for another state.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, sister, this podcast is just, as I said, it's a conversation. And I really, that's why I have my coffee. Hopefully you have something to drink, non-caffeinated. I lie. I'm Catholic. It has to be caffeinated. But it's a conversation. Our listeners are mainly youth, high school, middle school, young adults, and old people.
Okay. Like us.
And I don't know why I'm still doing this. I'm a little too old. And on this podcast, actually, I have it live on Instagram so I can get some input and some questions. So we might have some questions that I didn't write down.
Okay.
But first of all, tell us about yourself, because I met you in Florida. I didn't meet you. I listened to you, and knowing me, it's hard to keep me quiet and shut up. And the guy next to me was like, wow, you didn't say a word. It's like, she was like preaching. So tell us about yourself, and then we can have a little bit more conversation.
Sure. I am, like I said, I'm a native Texan. I grew up Baptist, and I attended University of Dallas, which is a Catholic university. But when I enrolled, I didn't know that it was Catholic, but obviously really loved it there. I started loving the church more after spending a semester in Rome. Really loved Pope St. John Paul II. I just thought he was a phenomenal preacher. And I graduated from UD, and after a couple of years of working in banking, I decided that I wanted to just be better about being a woman of God. Mm-hmm. And that ended up drawing me back to the Mass. And so I became Catholic in 2005. In 2009, I started discerning with my community. In 2011, I became a candidate. And then when I entered the novitiate in 2013, I ended a career in banking. I had been a 10-year career in banking. And went to the novitiate. And then just last November of 2020, I made my final vows as a sister of the Holy Family of Nazareth. So my community, we serve families and just try to renew a family spirit in the world. And we do that in a ton of different ministries, huge variety of ministries. So.
Wow. So the reason why I had to show the picture was, I am completely honest and with the things that I say. And sometimes my daughter said, Dad, you need to really hold your tongue. It's like, I am a child of God, and sometimes I just speak the way it is. So yes, that's what I feel. And the reason why I showed is, Sister Josephine, you're Black.
Yes.
Yeah, my daughter's probably said, I can't believe he said that. I said, but and the reason why I say that is growing up in Southern California all my life,
Mhm.
and then being an immigrant in the Philippines,
Mhm.
seeing a Black Catholic is pretty rare.
A Black American
A
Catholic
Black
can be
American
rare.
Catholic. I was
Yeah,
going to say that because
yeah, it can be
every
rare.
single Black Catholic that I've met is either from Africa, native to the African continent,
Right.
and it's very rare.
Yeah,
And so,
especially in like most parts of the country. I think if you were to go to Louisiana, it'd be less rare.
mhm.
But yeah, in Texas, it's rare. It's
and
definitely
then
rare.
I went to, I got the opportunity to go to NCC, National Catholic Conference for Youth Ministers in Florida, and that's where I met you or
Yes.
watched you. And I was like, oh wow. And then Father Josh, I'm like, oh wow. I was like, there's a lot of Black American Catholics, and that's what got me. And I always knew it. Um, really looking into the fact that wow, there are, because all my experiences in my life, and I have to be honest, the person who got me into the faith, got me into our faith,
Mhm.
is a Baptist Black woman. Is
Mhm.
Claudia Cooper. If you're ever going to listen to this, and if you ever come on this podcast, which I've been asking her, I think she's 80 now,
Mm.
her scripture text, and grant you, the scripture she used to text me since 1995 on a flip phone. Scripture,
That's love because it takes a
Psalms.
lot.
Yeah. And I was like,
That's
wow,
love.
And she taught me to love my faith. And
Mhm.
the reason was like, oh, she looks just like Miss Claudia. Um, she's from Illinois, and now this comes to a Miss Claudia
Mhm.
tribute, but this is your show. But you came on in Florida, and you cracked me up because you came on after a dog named Oprah.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Oh my God.
And it just
I
cracked
was
me.
like, did that woman name her daughter? Yes, I remember that. Yeah, and I think yes, it's coming back to me now because there were so many things that had occurred at that conference that were just out of a Saturday Night Live skit. And so I was like, there was at one point where there was a game going on the stage, and then there was like a dog who had a doll in their mouth, and the dog was named Oprah, and they were doing a laundry folding contest or something. And I was like, this has all been like a bizarre, yeah, just like a super bizarre experience that only could be born amongst a few thousand youth ministers. So
It was pretty hilarious because the reason why I went there was to learn a little bit more about ministry to our Hispanic community. And I come from San Bernardino, which is predominantly Hispanic. And I arrive in Florida hoping to find people to talk to about working with Hispanic communities. And I was it. I was the one who they went to.
oh wow,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh, okay, I know a little bit more about this than you do. So
wow,
I
yeah,
get it. But I did meet so many wonderful people there. But what touched me was your story, was your vocation story. Now I want to ask you, and you've already answered my first question. Thanks a lot. It says, did you grow up Catholic? But that was what touched me, was
Mhm.
that most people that we talk to, who we say discern, we approach young people to discern into a vocation, a religious vocation. You were a vice president of, you know, a bank. And is that giving all that up? How did you, tell us your vocation story of how you got to that point. I mean, you went to a
Mhm.
Catholic university, and, I'm thinking, oh, she went to a Catholic university, she graduated and became a nun, became a
No,
religious sister. It was
no,
like,
no,
no,
no, no, no,
there's
no,
a
yeah.
there's a gap there. And can you share with us the things with, even with your story with your mom? I mean, that touched me. I think I teared on that part.
Mhm. Um, I so there's a couple parts with my mom. So that your listeners know, when you're referring to my mom, he's referring to my birth mom, because when I was 8 years old, I was adopted by my aunt and uncle. I'm actually in Houston now, so here in Houston, and all my family still lives in Houston. And so when I started discerning, like from 2009 to 2011, I mean, this is the case, at least I would hope it would be the case for any kind of discernment where we like pause and look over our life. And my father is not living, but my birth mom is still living. And so the question became like, do I try to find her, and do I, connect with her? And my vocations director challenged me to connect with her. And she said, I think that you need to, she said, I think that it would be important for you to let her know that you forgive her for not raising you, or not finishing raising you. And I looked at her and I was like, it doesn't make sense to offer forgiveness to someone who didn't ask for it. And I thought, and she said, but do you forgive your mother? And I said, I do. Of course I do. I was an adult and had come to understand so much more of the situation that she was in. And so she says, well, then I think you should go to her. And I was like, I just don't feel like that's necessary. So it took me like 6 weeks to process that with the therapist. And then I decided I was going to go to her, but in that 6 weeks, I had become really puffed up. Like, and I think people in ministry need to hear this. Like, sometimes we think, we're saving the world, and it's my ministry and I'm doing all the things, like dusting our shoulders off. So I was going to my mother, dusting my shoulders off. Like, I'm going to bring the Sacred Heart of Jesus to her and his forgiveness. And so in the days kind of leading up to our meeting, by the goodness of God, like, he brought me back down to my identity as a daughter. And so there were just a series of things that happened over those days that I just could not have ever imagined would happen. Just other reconciliations in my family that I wouldn't probably get into in a podcast, that I needed in my daughter's heart, I guess is the way that I would say it. So by the time I sat down in front of her, I had been through a lot emotionally in the few days leading up to sitting down in front of her. But when I sat down in front of her, I arrived there as a daughter, which could have ever only been the appropriate way. And we just had this wonderful meeting, and we stay in touch today. It's not like a Hallmark movie. I think sometimes people want it to be the Hallmark movie where we meet in the field of wildflowers, right? And it's Texas with deeply bonnets, and we run to each other. It wasn't that. We met at a mall in a food court and had the most profound conversation in the mall of a food court, right? Because this is how God works, like breaking through extraordinarily in these ordinary spaces. We stayed in touch. She was at my first vows. She flew to Chicago for my first vows. I've been to her home. And I think I probably shared this in Florida. When I went to her home after my first vows, she said to me, we were sitting across from each other, and she said, I've just been really wanting to learn more about what you're doing and your faith. So I've been reading this book to kind of help me. And I was like, what book? And she reached in the pocket of her recliner and pulled out the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And it was like highlighted up. It had post-it notes in it. So that's the story about my mom. Like I said, it's not a Hallmark movie, and I stress that to people in a similar situation, like adopted, children, people who are adopted and trying to figure out how to relate to birth parents. It can be not so clear and clean all the time, and I think we're under pressure sometimes for it to be like a Hallmark movie. So I say that just to kind of help others in that situation know that it's okay for that to be kind of messy. And as far as my vocation story, like how I arrived in that relationship with that vocation director, really was born in going back to Rome after 4 years of being Catholic. And so I went there and had a really life-changing confession. And this is for all you priests out there who think you need to say all the things in confession. That life-changing confession, that priest only said 2 words to me. He said, just begin, and he changed my life. So for y'all out there thinking you need to give the homily in the confessional. It's probably not the case. Um, so he told me just begin. I was confessing all the things that I knew I was called to do and wasn't even taking one step toward. I came back from that trip. I got a spiritual director. He helped me learn how to pray. And then one day before the Blessed Sacrament in prayer, I thought it would be so cool to be a sister and serve the church. And from that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about this thought. And so eventually, I had a friend help me get the courage to visit the sisters. And that the first convent I visited is where I ended up entering. Like I wasn't one of those, I gotta shop the internet. Like I think sometimes we make that mistake and think that God is hiding from us. But usually we're hiding from God. It's usually the case. And so, yeah, that's it. That's kind of.
Wow. And you know what? You answered my question. My second question was, what advice would you give to someone who would go through the same thing that you went through? I always have this question though, because every person has different. How early do you think that we should be talking to kids, youth about vocation? You know, I mean, how early should we be speaking to them about it?
I think it's not ever too early. Like I think our kids need to have an understanding as early as they can like talk of that there's moms and there's dads and there's sisters and there's brothers and there's priests. Because if you really look at like how secular culture forms our kids, because don't ever be mistaken thinking there's a randomness to secular culture. There's a great intelligence to secular culture, and it's forming our children. And so I've got 4-year-olds who know yoga poses, right? So if a 4-year-old can know a yoga pose, they can know that they're an option for your life is to be a sister or a priest. Right? So it's just never too early.
I always tell this story of my grandfather's brother, Grandpa David. He was a single man, and our little village in the Philippines is filled with lawyers, teachers, doctors, and nurses. And when you ask every single one of those persons, why did you become a nurse, a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer, or an architect? And he said, well, since I was a kid, that's what Grandpa David said I should be. And he instilled in them, because this is when he said, when I asked him before he passed in 1987, I said, why would you tell them that? He said, I could see it in them. And he instilled in them that you would make a great teacher. And they believed it. I mean, who wouldn't believe Grandpa David? I mean, he was like the wise man. He was like, you know, you go to him for $1 and a word of advice.
Yeah. But sometimes I think now we have almost kind of like too many choices. I think sometimes adults are shy or hesitant to have that kind of authority in their kids' lives. But especially to parents, there is a mysticism to parenting, and there's an authority given to you as parents, particularly as the domestic church. And it's an authority that has a likeness to the magisterium. Like a kind of a parallel, not sameness, but a likeness. And it's so important to like take that authority and really live it, like, you know, while also continuing to grow in our own faith as adults so that we can live that authority more fully. But yeah, now we have so many choices. We hesitate to live out the authority that God has entrusted to us. You know, there's websites upon websites to look at options for orders instead of seeing that God has placed a couple of really great orders probably right in front of you, and that stuff's probably not coincidence. You know. And so like
it's almost like a lot of times when I talk to parents, even youth, it's almost like we're trying to talk them out of a religious vocation. So, well, it's like the response is when some kid who's in the 5th grade says, I want to be a priest, the answer is, oh, you're too young. Wait until you're college. Well, by the time he's in college, he's the last thing he's going to be thinking of. Or they're in high school and a young man says, I want to be a priest. And people's response is, really?
Right.
Instead of,
No.
really? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, really? Oh, awesome. And then
Yeah.
there's the overboard people who want someone in their parish to become a priest, and all of a sudden they go overboard and says, oh, well, you got to go to this retreat, you have to
Right.
do this, and let's get you sponsored. And I was like, oh, now you're scaring the kids.
Now you're saying that's too much. Like it's not.
Too much.
It's
But
not natural. Yeah.
but what would be your advice to a community, my community? This is, how do you increase vocation?
Hmm. Well, see, it's interesting when you say your community. Do you mean your parish or your ethnic community, as in Filipino?
uh well, my parish.
Parish. Okay. I think it's to really, in a sense, like these vocations, like when you start to talk about priesthood, religious life, brother, there is an exceptionalness to them in the sense that they are not what the majority does. And so I think because it's not a part of the majority, it can sometimes feel too far of an outlier for our youth. And like, so to try to draw these vocations in from the outlier, and just like have all these different people living these different vocations right at the table with you. So don't sit them up high to where it feels like they're out of people's reach, right? Because who I was, if sisters was only for people like way up here who had all this kind of perfect piety, I would not have this veil. Like I would fail all them tests. And so just to bring everyone to the table and have this language of these are all the ways to be a body of Christ. So I guess the sense like normalizing these vocations, but saying to our youth, like you've got to show up at the table in the body of Christ in a vocation. Like, you've got to do that. We've got to make that choice. We've got to listen and discern like how God is calling us to show up at the table as a husband, as a wife, as a sister, as a brother, as a priest. But it's all our table and we all come here and we're in this together. So I guess the main thing is to stop setting these vocations apart. And I think that would help a lot with pathology. I think some of the reasons that we've had, some of the difficulties we've had among clergy and like clericalism and things like that is because we have failed to view it as a table.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely an order to things and there's a proper hierarchy, but it's still this concept of at the table. And so I think that might help.
And even giving them a seat at that table to be able to say, hey, you know what, I am interested. And people are affirming that that is something that is a viable thing for you. And we're here to support you, but we're not here to force you because, as a child, I was forced and ran away all the way to the Philippines. But I got to ask this question because Youth Minister Tony said this question. I think he would kill me if I solicited questions and I never asked it. No, that wasn't it. There was a really cool one.
I suppose.
Yeah, it was something about, are you allowed to? So as I fumble through all these questions, here it is, I think. Oh, here it is. It goes, are there things sisters aren't allowed to do, like watch certain movies or say certain words or dress a certain way, etc.?
Allowed to, I mean, there are some communities where they make it simple for you like that and they hand you a list and it's like, this is what you can wear, this is how you can speak. There are communities out there that do that. In our community, there are ways that it is common sense that you should not dress as a spouse of Jesus Christ, right? And like, I remember once, I'll just tell a story to help understand how this is handled in the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth. And so each community could really only answer this for themselves because each community has like constitutions. And so constitutions are rules that govern these types of things, right? And here's a story to kind of describe how it works for us. Okay. I had gotten once, and again, went to college and was in high school, in a public high school. So there are all kinds of people that I am friends with in the past and I'm still friends with, and we're not all of the exact same mind, right? So I've got a huge diversity of friends. And so I got an invitation once to a bachelorette party while I was a postulant. And I read it and was like, oh, I probably can't go to that, but I will call my friend and find like another time we can get together and celebrate her upcoming sacrament, right? So the invitation was sitting out on my desk, and my formation director came in my room. It was my office, came in my office, and she picked it up and it said, wear your best devil costume to the bachelorette party. And she looked at me and she said, are you going to this? And I said, well, I had not planned on it because I don't have a devil costume. So there wouldn't really be a place for me there. And so she looked at me and she said, how do you decide whether or not you can go somewhere or wear something, you know, now that you're a postulant, which is very early formation as a sister? So she was saying, like, what are you using to kind of discern that for yourself? Where should you go? What should you wear? Where should you not go? What should you not wear? And I was like, I don't know. I told her the truth. I said, I just know in my gut that as a postulant of the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth, that wouldn't be an appropriate place for me. And so she looked at me and she said, you don't wear this habit yet. She said, but once you have it, let it help you with your discernment. So if you are not comfortable being seen there in your habit, then you need to ask yourself, should you be there? Right? You need to ask yourself, should you be there? And this isn't like, you know, I'm on vacation, so I've got on jeans or whatever, I'm with my family. This is like, I'm purposefully hiding myself because there's something not quite right here that for my vocation. And so in our community, we're really encouraged to have that level of maturity where instead of getting a list, right? Like you're not going to work out in the fabletics because nuns don't wear fabletics, right? We can't do that. Instead of getting a list, it's more so like an ongoing discernment on like what really matches who you are. So that's how we handle that. So no, I mean, if that's a young person asking that question, no, I don't work out in tights because that's not appropriate for nuns. I try to say nice things, but I'm not perfect. So if bad things come out of my mouth, I go confess them. And there are some places where I know I would never go in my habit, and so I don't go at all, whether I have my habit on or not. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I love what you said is, would this be appropriate for the bride of, of our Lord Jesus Christ to be gallivanting around wearing this outfit or going to this event or speaking like this? It's like, oh, look, that's Jesus' wife.
Right. What does that say about Jesus? Right? So I think sometimes we would like to make it more complicated than it is to help us find lines that we probably need to get off of.
Holy common sense. That's what we call it. Holy common sense. And also, Catholic.dad does not wear tights while working out because it just looks like there's two pigs in there fighting amongst each other. So that's what youth ministry did. He's let these two giblets inside, and now they're always arguing. But we're gonna get back to skinny days. I promise you that. Hopefully one day, sooner than later. We're not gonna ask that, Tony. But I asked you to come on this podcast because you posted, because I stalk you ever since 2000 and the time that we met in 2018. By the way, do you know that I won the prize to be able to go to the National Catholic Conference for Youth Ministers that was supposed to be in Louisiana in November of 2020? I won that.
Wow.
Yeah, darn COVID canceled all that.
COVID canceled that. Are they having it this time though?
I don't know, but I'm still waiting for my email that says, hey, you know what, we're going to honor that and we're still going to give it to you for free.
It's to see what had happened was email. Because I know like one year they do NCYC and the other year they do NCCYM. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. So this year we're technically on the NCYC year. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah. I said, I wonder if I'm going to get it. So constantly going, checking my email. It's like,
refresh.
did I get like, so shout out and call out to NCCYM. Did I still get my freebie trip?
I think you probably would.
Yeah,
I know those guys a little bit. I think they'd probably honor it.
I was really looking forward to going to Louisiana and seeing Father Josh's parish, because I think he needs to write a book on how to actually form parishes like that. Because and you know, I'm gonna say, throw it out, Father Josh, you need to put something out there on YouTube on it's like on DIY parish community.
Building a functional parish.
Yes.
Steps. No. Prayer. and additional duties as
I love this conversation. But both you and Father Josh are on this book, and this is like a book perfect for youth ministers because it's short, because you don't have much time. Literally went through this book in one sitting, in between grading papers and setting up a podcast, and couldn't put it down. I am a history buff. I love history. And so the Lives of the Saints is just one big giant history book. You learn so much of, you know, it's like scripture, you know, placing things that happen in those events. So this book, Black Catholics on the Road to Sainthood. If you haven't purchased this book, if you haven't read it, if you haven't borrowed it from your youth minister, if you're a youth minister who does not have this book and say, what's wrong with you? Go purchase it, OSV. And by the way, we are not, you know, they didn't send us this book. It's like, we purchase it ourselves. It's $9.95, not including shipping. So buy a few so you don't have to pay double shipping. Just saying. But amazing book. Amazing book. Short, sweet, to the point, easy to give to youth, to read, clear. There's no minutia in it. It's just to the point. And what I loved about this book, sister, is that it pointed you to look for more.
Yes, we bought them for our whole staff at our school. And that was the consistent feedback that I got, was when someone would finish a story, they would start Googling the saint, like, well, yes, I need more, I need to know more, I need to know what had happened was, and like they immediately. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know if the editor, Michael Heinlein, had that in mind, you know, to leave people with seeking, with the indication to seek, or if that was just kind of born in the spirit and the providence of God, because that's how we grow to love the saints. Is like we want to seek out their stories and like know more about them. And so that, you are correct. That is one of the consistent responses to that book, is like, I need to know more.
Yep.
I need to know more. Yeah.
This is like the Netflix of little books. It's like, oh, okay, let me go read to the next episode. And then you're ending to the next episode. Where's the series? It's like, where's series number 2? And so you find yourself going on YouTube, watching every single thing, and then looking for more, which is very much a great thing. This is also one of the things that I do with when I did ministry, is I would send links to the youth of like really holy links and make them watch it, because then what happens to their feed is they get fed with more of this stuff. Like a trick of the trade. What one youth once said, it's like, how come I'm only getting like this stuff? I mean, it's like I'm like getting multiple information on religion, and it's like, well, I don't know.
And meanwhile, you're like Dr. Youth Minister Evil.
What else can I send?
That's a really good point. I want to start doing that to the kids.
It's like, hey, click on this link and watch it and tell me what you think. And hey, watch this one. And they're like, all of a sudden it's like, wow, like my entire feed, that's all I'm getting. That's good.
Brilliant idea.
So how did you get involved with writing this book? Because you did write this part, and I really want to, well, I got to make sure my time is on. I really want you to focus on what you wrote, because your section of the book is on Servant of God, Julia Greeley. Never knew about Servant of God, Julia Greeley. Never knew about a lot of the Black Catholics that are in this book. I mean, I just have to mention, Venerable Pierre Toussaint, by the way, amazing life.
Mhm.
Talk about his life was amazing. Yeah, Henrietta, I still don't know how to say her last name. Palilia Pruo. I don't know. How do you say her last name?
You're fine.
Like,
Yeah.
and then the life of Father Augustus Tolkien.
Augustus. Yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Being Filipino, that resonated because, up till the 1890s, Filipinos couldn't be priests. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You're just forbidden. And that's the whole reason why there's a Filipino called a Glipay church, which separated from the Catholic Church because, well, why can't we be pastors of our own parish? And then the other ones who are on here is a servant of God, Mary Lang, Julia Greeley, servant of God, Thea Bowman. And I was like, wow, how come this was never taught? And so made it a point in my classes, like, hey, we got to look at this. And the same consistent things that people say is, I never knew.
Yeah. I think, I'll be really clear. I know sometimes, I think it's so, I don't know how to say it. I think sometimes the need to speak clearly about the lives of these saints gets mixed into what people are describing as being woke and all of this woke this and woke that. And I actually want to encourage people not to collapse this into that. This isn't about that. It's just about asking the question that you just asked, what has prevented these stories from being as well known as some of the other stories of the saints and saints in progress? And that is a tendency in our church to attend collectively to what is mainstream. And so I try to ask people simple questions like, what made it that most angel statues you see in churches across America are white? Right? And we don't know that angels are all white. So how did that get decided that way? And so not to make this about that and but to make this about our church and about shoring this gap up in our church. And not to make that a political endeavor and not to make that a purely sociological endeavor, but to make that an endeavor about us looking more like a sincere reflection of the kingdom of God.
Yes, amen.
This is what this is about. Yeah. And so these stories, that's a gap. And that is the other consistent response. A, I want to know more, and B, why didn't I know? And we need to make sure that, in a sense, we safeguard that as Catholics from getting caught up into secular matters. We need to really be, I think, vigilant about that.
Yeah, it's in a discussion I had. One young person said, was saying that, have we been complicit with this? And I had to say that, being complicit and being ignorant of that and being raised in a fashion, in a way, is what it is. Now let's move forward.
And fix it.
That's not being woke. That is looking at what we had in the past, and then
getting it in order,
and then making a better present and future.
Yeah, and we don't need to borrow. I mean, I think that's almost like a trigger word for people now. It's literally a 4-letter word, and it's a trigger word for people now. And people are either rising up in violent defense of it, or they're rising up in violent attack of it. And it's that's secular matter. Yeah. And, I read it for my Saturday morning reading, Yeah. Saturday morning is where I do my non-spiritual reading. But it's not a priority for us, and we should not take it as our framework for building the kingdom. And so it's what Toni, I almost said Toni Morrison. It's not Toni Morrison. I did a thesis on Toni Morrison in high school. It's Maya Angelou. She says, do what you can until you know better and then do better.
Mm.
And so something along those lines. And so we now know better and we need to do better. We just need to do better. And so, yeah.
So, so tell us about, you wrote that section on servant of God, Julia Greeley. You wrote some amazing things on here. Tell us a little bit of something about servant of God, Julia Greeley, just a little synopsis of what she is, because I really, I was not triggered, but this just spoke out to me when you wrote this. It says, it occurred to me that the heart of Jesus had to be almost pure longing to restore, longing to heal sin, division, and brokenness, longing to make new, a longing to reconcile. I began to see more clearly the unceasing font that flows from his always open heart, seeking a place to be received so that the work and will of God the Father can be accomplished. I meditated on that for days. I'm like, wow, I gotta ask her, where did you draw that from?
I think because when they wrote me about this book, I was like, I want Thea Bowman, I want Thea Bowman. I was asking for Thea. And so I just think it's so good to be truthful with people. So when they wrote me back and they said, we've assigned you Julia Greeley, I didn't know who she was myself. And so I had to spend time getting to know her. And so I sat down and started getting to know her. So she was from Denver. She lived in Denver after she was freed from being a slave. And she fell in love with the Catholic faith, particularly a devotion to the Eucharist. She would call the Eucharist her breakfast.
Yeah.
She'd go to Mass every day, and Jesus was her breakfast. And then the way they described it, it was like a one-woman St. Vincent de Paul. Mm-hmm. And so she knew people in the neighborhood. Again, she's just a model of like proper diocesan ministry in my mind, in the sense that she was devoted to and focused on her local church. And she wasn't trying to be more than her local church. Mm-hmm. And I think like with Catholic media on the rise and, speaker circuits and everything that we have, all these great resources, I just want to remind everyone that we're each entrusted to a particular local church. Mm-hmm. And it's so important that we prioritize that. Like to Saint Mother Teresa said, find your own Calcutta. So your local church is your Calcutta. And so she was just such a model of devotion to her local church. And so she knew who needed help in the neighborhood, and she knew who needed intercessory prayer, and she knew who needed food, and she knew who needed things. And she would collect these things she would give from her poverty, and she would deliver them at night to reduce the experience of shame for people. Mm-hmm. So she would walk at night because she was concerned for people experiencing shame, receiving, because oftentimes it was white people receiving things from this Black woman in a time where that was not seen as appropriate. She experienced racism through, obviously the emotional wounds of racism, but also the physical wounds of racism, while living as a slave and once no longer living as a slave. That continued. And so I also think she's just a really, really proper model for how to respond to racism.
Yeah.
And I'll tell people my nickname when I worked for the bank was Cujo. So I know about anger, okay? I know about snarkiness. I know about sarcasm. I have a PhD in all of the above.
We will get along. My family's love language is sarcasm. And for you young people who don't know what Cujo is, it was a horror movie with a big black Rottweiler dog that ate and killed people. So if you've never watched the movie Cujo, that is a recommendation, not by me, but Sister Josephine. Go watch Cujo, and then you'll realize it's like, oh my goodness, that holy woman compared herself to that.
Cujo, right? And so like I know what it is to be like angry, frustrated, tired with not only like overt racism, but also covert racism, ongoing systemic limitations, ongoing systemic racism, or like systemic withholding of key resources based on race and the structure of things. I know what it is to be like angry in the face of that. And I think people like Julia Greeley really challenge us to like look at ways to really transform hearts and like convert hearts for Jesus. And so that reflection, I mean, when I looked at her life, all I could think about was the Sacred Heart because of her devotion to the Sacred Heart. Because of her devotion to the Sacred Heart. And it was kind of like God's providence because it was God's providence. I thought my best friend's little son was coming in here, and I was straight up going to introduce your listeners to him. But it was God's providence because on my 30-day retreat in preparation for vows, that is where I started to just really see the Sacred Heart differently and see the Sacred Heart in this sense of like just pure longing, just pure longing to reconcile, to restore, to bring about like the vision of the Father. And God's heart, I mean, that's what Jesus came to do, to like return and reconcile everything back to the Father. And so we know that he has this font. You and I are recording this the day before Divine Mercy Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there's this font flowing into the world. We know that Pope St. John Paul II spoke about, in his encyclical on the Eucharist, he spoke about everything being permeated with the blood of Christ. And so when I looked at her and tried to see her walking around with this wagon, carrying all those wounds, emotional wounds and physical wounds that could have left her bitter and caused her to turn in. And instead, she was just like flowing with this gift. And then her devotion to the Sacred Heart. And then my reflection from my 30-day retreat. It really felt like that reflection, I don't know, it was offered to me from God and perhaps from Julia Greeley as well, in a sense, like, because I don't know that I could have put all that together on my own. So I think that somehow she participated in that, and I love her very much now. And I pray through her intercession often. She is growing as a friend to me. And she died on the Feast of the Sacred Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And she experienced a lot of the emotional abuse that can come with racism, and that came with slavery, and that came with racism, in the sense, emotional abuse in the sense that it's like a taking away of identity. And so she didn't even know her own birthday, which is a huge part of our identity. And so when I saw that she died on the Feast of the Sacred Heart, I wrote in there, perhaps let us consider this a birthday for her, like a re-offering to her of identity, that because identity is stripped away in racism, human dignity is stripped away in racism. And so that happened to her, and so yeah, so I love her. I know it's so tacky, but I have to plug in my charger. I'm sorry to do that in the middle of the recording.
And I want to honor your time, Sister Josephine, and I really want to thank you for this.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to thank you for what you wrote in the book, and
Mm-hmm.
I think our greatest response to racism is what's written in this book, and how these Black Catholics responded to that. And
How
the
they
healing,
responded.
and the healing that is bestowed upon us as faithful, as the faithful can really learn from the lives of these saints. But definitely, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope we can do this again, because just have some coffee. It's like, I wish we could do this live. Maybe if we do NC, National Catholic Conference for Youth Ministers, we'll do one live there. Oh, that'd be amazing. We'd be folding clothes.
And I want to say to the last thing you just said, like about the book being like a response to racism, I think sometimes we have to be careful in the church, because like if there's one group over here responding to something in this way, there's another group over here responding in this way, and sometimes we will bump up against each other. But like, again, it's a table structure, each at the table called to respond in their own way. And all of that response is about leaving the situation better than we found it, so that we can keep moving forward. And so,
Not all the disciples agreed with each other. They had conversations in the presence of God.
Yes.
And it was
Peter and Matthew probably couldn't stand each other.
Right?
Peter, every time Matthew came in a room, I could see Peter being like, "Oh."
There he goes again. I was like, oh, Thomas is late again. We can totally have a good time. I hope that we do this again, hopefully live, hopefully wherever they're going to have the Youth Ministry Conference. I'd love to have that. Thank you, Sister, very much for joining us in this podcast. I want everyone to know to get this book. I also want you guys to look for Sister Josephine Garrett on YouTube. She doesn't have much on there. I'm so disappointed. I've watched it a couple of times, and it's like, but they're really short, sweet. Some of your stuff, some of your skits are so hilarious. People, you guys got to follow her.
I like to be an equal opportunity slayer of all groups.
So, some of the stuff on there, her vocation story is on there as well. I just fall in love with your story and the story of a lot of if you look at my YouTube channel and my feed, it's like, it's almost like I should have been somewhere around there, priest, but no, that's not what I was called to. I'm just calling people to become priests and religious. So friends, that's all we have for this episode of Disconnected. As usual, we prayed disconnected. If it didn't, then it's Sister Josephine's fault. Just kidding. Just kidding. Send us a DM, your comments to catholic.dad50@gmail.com, or you can DM us on our podcast on Instagram at catholic.dad or Disconnected. Please subscribe to the podcast on many podcast platforms. And as always, as Tony said, I have to say, support us. Go to our bio link in our Instagram and something about the about on YouTube. Click the bell and whatever. I don't know if that thing goes, but do that anyways. So as usual, friends, remember, live a life of holiness. We'll be praying for you. Please pray for us, and most importantly, be blessed and be third.
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise of different generations of new girls and boys. So sit back and relax, this Catholic podcast. Don't overreact if these thoughts are abstract. When it's hosted by Catholic.dad, who knows what's gonna happen?
Hey, what's up, fam?
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if this connected.
What's up, fam? To connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along.
Expect runaway thoughts like a runaway train. Break into conversation like links of a chain. Make a Hail Mary pass, hope this connects. Have a question for a guest, put it to rest. Live a life of holiness, lead by example. Follow at Catholic.dad and mini tangled. Christ leads our way, he's the good shepherd. Pray for one another, be blessed and be there. Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if this connected.